and a lot of media organizations are giving them attention with it. And
okay, so here's the deal. Here's my personal opinion with Howard Stern going after Kanye West. Both these groups are hypocrites. The Jews, the blacks, both these groups essentially created everything that you see today as far as cancel culture is concerned, as far as woke culture is concerned, as far as social justice warriors are concerned. Both these groups essentially created the blueprints with the race card, with the anti-Semitic card. They essentially created the blueprint for everything that anybody who's anti-wokeism, anti-PCism, anti-cancel culture, etc., these two groups, the blacks and the Jews, actually created this. It's an absolute undeniable fact. I don't know why that's not put out there by the media. And they were okay with it 30 years ago, 35 years ago. They were okay with it as long as it promoted their agenda. Because here's the thing about it. They essentially, them and the whites essentially monopolized the media from 1995. So previous to 1995, it was pretty much all white and Jews. But after 1995, when hip hop took over, when the rose of hip hop actually created a large enough segment for black people in the cultural landscape, and from 1995 to 2017, it was pretty much whites, blacks, and Jews who actually monopolized the media for a good 25 years. When 2017 came around, that was the ascension of social media. 2017 to the present essentially gave a voice to every other group that wasn't white, black, or Jew. It actually gave a voice to every single person, every single group, every single denomination who wanted a voice with power behind the voice. And that's essentially what happened. Now you have this situation where you have your Kanye West, and then you have your Ben Shapiro's, and then you have all these other, blacks and Jews and even whites coming along and saying woke culture is cancer, woke culture, social justice warriors, social media, etc., will doom society, etc. You're getting this from people who created that culture. It's okay when they use that culture to promote their own propaganda for their own race. It's okay when they use that culture to cancel other people out. It's okay when they use that culture to bash the hell out of Asian Americans for a good 25 years, essentially pushing any kind of progress that Asian Americans made for decades and decades, essentially just pushing them out of the cultural relevance of America from 1995 to 2017. Now you have this situation where your Kanye West's, where your Ben Shapiro's, the blacks and the Jews and what have you, coming out denouncing the monster that they actually contributing to creating and promoting for a good 25 years, because it doesn't benefit them at this point, because once you give a voice to everybody, you don't have one group going out their way to subjugate another group, to terrorize another group, to subvert another group. But let me just get to this Howard Stern situation. Howard Stern is possibly one of the biggest hypocrite Jews ever in the history of anything whatsoever. All right, this guy's career essentially spanned from what he was, when he was moving up the ladder to what he is today, which is an absolute opposite, a mirror opposite of what he was. And it's sad that he could still be out there having the success that he has, doing a whole entire 360 on everything that he quote unquote promoted or stood for, etc., etc. Now, my beef with Howard Stern is, aside from him being a hypocrite and criticizing everything that he promoted earlier in his career, my beef with Howard Stern is that he's a selectively racist Jew. All right. Apparently, the race card, the anti-Semitic card, gives blacks and Jews the excuse for anything that they do, as far as excusing their racism, excusing their prejudicial behavior, excusing cultural, what I call cultural terroristic activity when it comes to other races, that other groups of races that they could get away with, which I coin selective racism. And selective racism, essentially the racism that took over from, quote unquote, the monolithic white racism that was there till 1995. All right. Once you had the blacks and the Jews gaining their own presence in the media, then you have this whole selective racism where it's these groups going, well, I can make fun of you, I can be racist towards you, I can be culturally terroristic towards you, I could do the most negative, racist, heinous jokes towards you, but there are certain groups that I can't do it towards because there are consequences to it, and I don't want those consequences, so I'm going to stay away from them. But I'm going to pretend that what I'm doing is pretty much spreading out hate towards everybody. So it's essentially, if you hate everybody, if you put out like you pretend like you hate that negates your hate, that negates any kind of negative connotation for your hate. But that's really not the case, because it's just the guys. All right. They're what the tools that they use for doing this is, there's positive stereotypes, there's negative stereotypes, there's neutral stereotypes. Okay, none of those stereotypes are the same. People want positive stereotypes, people want neutral stereotypes. Nobody cares about, you're not gonna have anybody go after you with neutral stereotypes. It's the negative stereotypes that are the racist stereotypes. Negative stereotypes are essentially the only racist stereotypes that exist. Positive and neutral stereotypes are racial stereotypes, but they're not racist stereotypes, because essentially it's not negative. It's actually positive. It's saying something positive about your race or your people, etc., etc. So those are the tools that they use. All right, they'll put out positive stereotypes towards a certain group, even themselves, and then they'll do negative stereotypes towards this group, and then they'll do neutral stereotypes towards this group, and they pretty much just wrap it up and say, look, I stereotyped everybody, so I'm not racist. This is what Family Guy does. This is what South Park does. This is what any show or any comedian or any entertainer that you think is politically non-PC, they're not politically non-PC, they're selectively non-PC. Which gets to my point about Howard Stern. Here's what gets me. During that whole 9/11, that day when 9/11 happened, Howard Stern goes on a rant. He goes on a rant and says that Arab Americans who are Americans should be interned, should be put in internment camps, like the Japanese Americans were put into internment camps. And he essentially went out of his way. Now, Japanese Americans are Americans. They pay the taxes. I've always said that Asian Americans are the best Americans that this country has ever had. They paid, when they were put into the theater of war in World War II, they were the most decorated bunch of soldiers that America has ever had. there's at least a couple of battleships named after Asian Americans. None of that actually gets put out there by these whites, blacks, and Jews because it doesn't benefit their storyline. Matter of fact, it negates their storyline because then you're pushing another group into the limelight, into a better spot than you, into a better caste system spot than you. But it always stuck me when Howard Stern went on his 2, 3, 4 hour tirade and constantly brought up that the Arab Americans should be put into internment camps like the Japanese Americans were. Did they put the German Americans in internment camps? Because I could have sworn they actually put Eisenhower, I think Eisenhower was a German American, they put him in the lead of that German theater, of warfare, World War II in Germany. They put him as a Central American lead as far as representation of American military power. And then after Germany lost the war, I think he became president of the United States. So you put a German American, and I've always said that white people should be called European Americans. All right, Howard Stern should either be called European American or a Jewish American. Everybody else has like this little, this African American, this Asian American, Latino American. Everybody else has a certain kind of American, but these whites and Jews have this whole I'm just American kind of thing. No, I think the reality is that the fact is that the way it should work is that the only real Americans are the red Americans, are the Native Americans. Everybody else should be called a foreign American. There's no reason why Native Americans should be called Native to begin with, because they're just here. It's redundant. And I know I'm going on a little tirade here, going off a little bit, but I just want to say that, I really don't care what Kanye says about the Jews, and I don't really care about what the Jews says about Kanye and black people, but the Jews will not say anything negative as far as racially about black people, because they know the consequences to that. You get canceled. I don't know. I think at this point, maybe the black race card trumps the Jewish race card, or maybe the gay homophobic card trumps all these cards, but they're not actually in the realm of topic at this point with Kanye West. So I'm just going, if Kanye West was an Asian American celebrity, if Kanye West was a Latino American celebrity, if Kanye West was an Arab American celebrity, Howard Stern, Sarah Silverman, Michael Rappaport, all these Jewish people who consider themselves to be outspoken and non-PC would definitely be taking the racial route at this point. You would be hearing the worst negative racial stereotypes of any of these groups, and they would just go on a racial rant on any of these groups. But with black people, they're careful with their words. Kind of like how Family Guy is careful with their jokes. Kind of like how South Park is careful with their jokes. Kind of like how every single one of these quote unquote non-PC, they consider themselves non-PC, but they're careful with their words when it comes to certain groups of people. It's kind of like how Shane Gillis was kind of careful with his words, but he didn't live around Jewish people, so he didn't know about that whole Jewish thing. So he got canceled because of the jokes he made about Jewish people, not because of the jokes that he made about Asian people. But I'm going off on a rant about this. But Howard Stern and all these Jews use the media, as well as the blacks, use the media the most cowardly way they could possibly use the media as a racial weapon against Asian Americans, particularly over the last 25 years, against Asian Americans, against Latino Americans by not giving them a place in the media, by being as homophobic as they could against gays, lesbians, trans, etc., against women's groups by subjugating women. These groups, both the blacks and the Jews, in the media, were the most culturally terroristic group of people as far as using the media for the agenda of the promotion of their own race while bashing the hell out of other races. But let me get back to Howard Stern and what he said during that whole 9/11 thing that happened. Howard Stern really couldn't give a crap about any other group of people besides his group of people. This guy does not care about any other group of people. Matter of fact, they'll go out of their way to culturally terrorize, culturally commit to a caste system. Him and Kanye and whoever else. These people, once you put them in give them a certain amount of power as far as media power, as far as their place in having the ability to dictate their culture or their viewpoint in the media, they will go out of their way to culturally terrorize, subjugate, destroy any other group that they think is a competitor to them. They will go out of their way to destroy every other group as long as they can climb the ladder. They'll tread on any other group. They have no boundaries as far as because they have no boundaries because of the race card. They have no boundaries because of the anti-Semitic card. They're two-faced. Both these groups are two-faced. I couldn't give a crap about what Howard Stern has to say about Kanye West. I couldn't give a crap as far as what Kanye West has to say about the Jews. Everybody knows that there are, the Jews control the media. Let's all be honest. Let's all be honest about the amount of control that the Jewish representation have as far as the media is concerned, as far as the government institutions concerned, etc. I don't want to go deep into that, but just to end it, fuck Howard Stern.